Hello everyone. My name is Jeremiah Morgan. I haven't spoken to most of you today, so you don't know how silly the next 10, 15 minutes is going to be. So I apologize in advance. But I'm going to be talking about AI in terms of how it can be attacked and defended. This is going to be very different to what you've been listening to up to this point, because up to this point you've been hearing people about what we do in SE Labs and specific tests that we're providing. This is more of an understanding of how the AI world is working out within cybersecurity, what you guys as vendors can do, and what is happening against you guys as vendors too. Now, there's a few things I want to touch on first of all. For people online, I'm sorry you have to see my face for the next 15 minutes. You have to deal with that. Also, if you're friends with Anthropic specifically, you might not like this presentation. I'm going to say a lot about some of their products that you might not like. And otherwise, I just hope you enjoy the next 10, 15 minutes. So I want to first touch on the idea of what's happening in cybersecurity and AI right now. There is a growing need of AI to be part of an ecosystem within any sort of company, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's just anyone protecting their own assets. Unfortunately, a lot of those companies don't have any AI policies in place, and what tends to be an issue for a lot of these companies is that they know that they need AI, they know they need it now, but they don't really have any sort of policies in place to say, well, this person is responsible for this, this is how much it costs, you're spending too much tokens on this, what are you doing, etc., etc., etc. A lot of professionals have noticed that from the attacker side of things, a lot of attacks, especially with ransomware and zero trust, which we'll touch on a little later, are used almost entirely by AI, and it's becoming a growing problem. As a result of this, as you can see here, there was a time frame of how long these attacks occur. There used to be 8 hours as a average, and that's down to, 22 seconds. So it's a really big improvement in the last 2 to 3 years, and it's only increasing. So let's first talk about when defensive AI actually works. There was a report by Google with their Big Sleep program, which I hope none of you are going to be doing through my talk, where they discovered a zero-day attack that was about to happen according to them, but they were able to stop it just in time. Now, unfortunately, in their report, they don't really go in terms of the details in terms of who these people are, how close the zero-day attack was, and what Google specifically did to stop it. But according to them, they were able to stop it in time. The specific thing that they found was an SQL-like corruption flaw where if you have, because the way that they do their data is it's put in sets of columns, and it realizes that if you bypass the maximum amount of data within that columns, it corrupts the file. And the Big Sleep program is able to understand that if an attacker was able to take advantage of that, they could corrupt someone's systems. And according to Google, they were able to stop that just in time. Again, I don't know how close it was. Google's been really close-minded about giving details, but according to their own reports, that's what they say. And next, I want to talk about the AI SOC framework in terms of how is this actually being used from a defensive perspective. First of all, we know that the way that attacks are being happening and the introduction of AI is become very difficult for humans to go through all of that data at once. They're becoming overwhelmed, basically. Again, nearly 3,000 alerts daily, most of them being unaccounted for. So clearly AI is needed to help along the way. The big thing to note from this, and some people, I should say, are not really understanding this correctly, is that the AI is not there to replace human beings. It's there to help them along the way. So as such, it's very important to understand who needs the AI product, what the product is, and what it specifically does. There's no uniform way of using AI from a SOC perspective. And here's a few examples of what you can have. First, you have the threat intelligence research. These are for teams that spend way too much time researching for new exposures and understand that they need a little bit of help along the way to make sure they got all the research that they have in mind. You have detection engineering, and that is for people who are really overwhelmed with going through the logic of coding and putting everything together like your framework and things of that nature. You have an alert investigation, which is more about people going through the alerts, understanding what it means, and not going through each and every individual log one by one by one by one by one. because there's thousands of them and it's too much for human beings to go through. Next is automated incident response, and that is just to help with the manual input of putting incident response reports. So again, everything's automated for them, which touches on threat hunting next. And that is more about understanding the capabilities of detection without wasting time, being a bit proactive and getting a report done as soon as possible. And finally, there is risk prioritization, which is basically having an AI able to grade how logs are in terms of how severe they are, how important they are, which ones you look at first, instead of someone looking for one individually and then grading it themselves, doing the report themselves, and going through that entire process themselves. And as such, every environment is different, and so are the gaps. Next, I want to talk about how it's used from an attacker perspective. What we've noticed is that a lot of these are based on vulnerabilities, finding zero-day specifically and sometimes ransomware. The big thing about this, apart from the fact that a lot of people who don't have the expertise are able to perform these advanced attacks, is that it's all about speed rather than innovation. It's all about finding what's already there, what's already tried and true, but what isn't being protected yet, and exploiting that, but in a quicker way than humanly possible. And so I'm quite proud of this. I said prompts are the new malware, because that's the idea now. You don't really need the expertise to even know what it is you want the AI to do. You just say, hey, do this thing, and the AI will do it for you. And a lot of the time, that is exactly what happened. There was an instance in Mexico last year, I want to say around September, between September and January of 2026, where there was a single person, well, I say single person, there was a group called, I think they were called Cronus Group, that said that they were involved, but they were probably lying. And what they did is that they used ChatGPT and Claude Code. And what we've noticed overall, not just with this example, but with a lot of examples, is that a lot of these threat actors tend to use both ChatGPT and Claude Code, because ChatGPT is better used for like recon and phishing and social engineering and things of that nature. And all the technical stuff is better for Claude Code. They're more advanced in terms of the actual exposure, the attack chain in a sense. As a result, there were many attack prompts done at once, many more done in terms of AI commands. I'll show you exactly what this looks like in a minute, but a lot was taken at the end and no one really knows what happened to that guy. And this is an example of what a report found in terms of what the attack looks like. I'll spare you the details of what you're looking at, but what I want you to take attention to is the time frame. From the initial exposure right until the end, this is the AI working completely independent of anything the threat actor is doing, and it's writing code and adapting that code on the fly. And this is all done in the space of 7 minutes. This is something that a human would take like hours, if not days, if not weeks to do. And AI is able to do all of that within 7 minutes. And this is like a prime example of how important AI, from the attacker perspective, is, and how serious it is for defenders to understand that, yeah, this is a lot more stuff you have to worry about, because it's a lot of stuff happening all at once and it's happening quickly. And another example is of another report that Google talked about, where they looked into how we can tell something is done by AI. It's all well and good to say, hey, this was done by AI and we think it's because of the time frame, but let's look at actually what we found and what evidence we have to suggest this is AI generated. One of the two big points is hallucinations, which always happens with AI. So sometimes it will put certain things in its code. For example, I don't know if any of you worked with AI in terms of their coding scripts, but they have a very particular way of doing especially comments. They always write comments in the same way. They use the same formatting. And it's one of those clues you can put to say, hey, yeah, this was done by AI rather than humanly made. This is especially true with Python, apparently. I'm not really sure why. But with any script that it does, it always writes the comments in the same way. Always everything does in the same. I don't know, coding can be a little bit diverse, and there's always a right and wrong way to do things. But overall, there's usually a way you can say, oh, this was humanly made or this was done by AI. And there's many clues out there that suggest that some of the things that they're finding in terms of the artifacts and some of the ways that it does things and the speed more than anything else just shows that, yeah, this is AI most likely. And speaking of AI, this is the bit where I will talk about Mythos, probably a bit too long, probably not in a way that Mythos supporters may like, but it's important to talk about because it has a big impact on cybersecurity already. I know some of you, or at least the companies you represent, are part of Mythos in the way that I mentioned in a minute. So I hope it's working out for you guys at least. And I hope some of the more negative things I show doesn't scare you a little bit. But let's talk about what the official story is first. So their idea is that you can use Mythos to detect vulnerabilities in your products or your assets or whatever you may have in a way that's simple yet effective. You have something like a program that you're selling or like a service that you have to provide, like software as a service or whatever you have, and you're worried about some sort of legacy vulnerability that your human workers may not have noticed. That's what Mythos is partly for. There is a system called Project Glasswing, which is where a lot of vendors, which I won't name, are part of. So that's the official narrative of Mythos. And here's an example when it works. A lot of the time, as I mentioned before, they tend to notice things that have been there for decades. In some cases, 30 years old, sometimes 15 years old. And the point is, it's things that a human hasn't really noticed, even though there'd be thousands of like coders looking into it over like tens of years in many cases. And sometimes it's just something that a human person hasn't noticed, and it's something that AI is able to see right away. And that's something that can be really helpful. But, well, one thing first. For those that don't know, the AISI stands for AI Security Institute. And they are an organization where they run a capture the flag thing for AI products. They started in, I think, November 2022. And I think the first model was ChatGPT Model 3, I believe. And the idea is to have like a really big attack chain format where it has everything from like stealing files, web interface vulnerabilities, and everything you can think of in between. And it turns out that Mythos was the first ever AI to do the whole thing from start to finish. Now, I should mention that ChatGPT Model 5.5 was the second, and it wasn't that far ahead. So I do want to emphasize that, yes, Mythos is quite good at what it does, but ChatGPT is catching up to that as well. But now let's talk about when it doesn't quite work. The developers at Curl are signed up to Project Glasswing, and they were asked by Mythos to check if they have any vulnerabilities. And Anthropic gave out a report to say, yes, we found 5 confirmed vulnerabilities. But then the developers looked at the vulnerabilities and decided that only 1 was actually real and was quite low in terms of how severe it was. 3 were false positives, and 1 was just a bug, according to them. So it really shows that, yeah, in some cases, Anthropic can be helpful, but not as helpful as it may be. But at least that's fine. At least it was just, well, it's nothing major, but it can be helpful to at least know. Surely they won't go out of their way to say, hey, like we found this some really amazing thing and we're going to write reports about it for everyone to see. Except they did that. So they found a vulnerability in FreeBSD, which is like an operating system for servers and things of that nature. And they wrote up a full report on this and said, hey, this is a brand new vulnerability. We found it. It's there. You can read about it. It's brand new. It's amazing. Except it's not amazing and it's not new. It already existed 20 years ago. And in a sense, we found out that it made a confusion in terms of what it's found. FreeBSD is a copy of MIT's Kerberos program. And so the same vulnerabilities that was found in 2007 with that program was also found in FreeBSD. And what we know from this is that AI and Mythos specifically is having an issue telling the difference between what is actually a new vulnerability and what is just in its training data. And that's something that's becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger problem as more vulnerabilities are being discovered. And it's not even new anymore. There are recent rumors that Anthropic are bringing out a brand new premium level AI called Oceanus. Now, it's not official right now. I think the rumors only came out like a couple of weeks ago. So there's still a lot we don't know. But according to rumors, there's a whole red team group of people who have gone through the code and determined a few things like, well, it is a better program. Some people say it's between like twice as better to like 5 times as big, depending on what you read. But the general consensus is that this is going to be a new program. It's going to come out soon. It's quite different to Mythos in terms of like who's going to be using it and why they're going to be using it. So it's not to replace Mythos so much, but it's such on a higher level to Mythos that Mythos doesn't really have that shiny new amazing feeling about it anymore. There are suggestions that an input, for example, will cost like $16, and I think an output will cost like $80, which is quite a lot of money for like per person to spend tokens on every day. It will add up a lot. I think Mythos by comparison is like a third of that, if not a quarter of that. So this is meant to be like a really amazing, ultra amazing product. And it's meant to deter anyone who's like on a low level, like a casual person to use, but it's not so expensive that someone who could actually use it would like just be turned away from it. So what does this all mean? It means that from a defensive perspective, we have a lot to worry about. There's a lot more people getting into the industry now, well, getting into hacking systems now because the barrier entry is so much lower now. It's pretty much anyone who can get ChatGPT and Claude to do the prompts right without it saying, oh no, I don't want to do that, that's illegal, sorry. But at the same time, defensive side is a bit all over the place. There are people who are using it correctly and those who are not using it quite well. And many of them are not using it in a way that's really consistent either. And like I said, vulnerability is just the beginning. It's one of the main focuses of Mythos and Oceanic and all these other ones. They tend to focus more on those. But as we all know, like a breach isn't just that. There's many more things to consider. There's many more things to worry about. And I do personally worry that they're focusing too much on one element of things just because it's something that human beings are not as good as finding by themselves, like zero-day exposures and vulnerabilities, because as we've seen, a lot of them will be there for a very long time. So it makes sense though to use ARs for that, but there's more to it than that. And so in the end, fixing it is just a part of the problem. We have to find a way to be able to catch up to these attackers in a way that we can consistently be on top of what they're doing. But like I said, it's a bit of a interesting swings and roundabouts is a way to put it. And so I'll close with this quote. The threat landscape your products were designed for is evolved beyond recognition. AI-assisted attacks are here. They're documented, they're cataloged, and they're repeated. And so a question remains, are your products ready? And with that said, I have three things to touch on. First of all, thank you. Thank you very much for not only just listening to my presentation, but everyone's presentations up to this point. Secondly, for those inclined, I have a bibliography for people who care. There's 3 pages of this. And the most interesting thing at all, out of everything, is that I am now available for questions if you have any. So does anyone have anything to ask me about AI or how it's worked or anything at all?
Sounds like you covered it, mate.
Yeah.
Well done.
Well, if that's everything then. Thank you very much.